Here it is. Okay. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. Today we're doing a Thai noodle dish called Pad Kee Mao, or if you're here in the States, you often see it colloquially referred to as Thai Drunken Noodles, excuse me. I found out recently that the reason that it's referred to as Thai Drunken Noodles is because it's a dish that you often will come across in Thailand when you are drunk. You get them at late at night on the street, in street noodles. So that's probably why you will frequently see it listed here in the States at Thai restaurants as Thai Drunken Noodles. It's kind of one of its colloquial or like informal names. For our purposes today, we're going to be making a version that is going to be making use of some ground pork, which I think is one of my favorite new ingredients, or one of my favorite ingredients to this particular Pad Kee Mao. You will also find, if you are sort of paying attention to the differences between pad or Thai noodles, that it's going to look very, very similar to another Thai noodle dish that we've done, which is called Pad See Ew, which looks very, very similar. Also makes use of fresh chow fun noodles. Also makes very, very heavy use of dark soy sauce, but features a couple more of veggies and maybe a couple of different ingredients. But for the most part, it still looks very, very similar, and we're actually going to be drawing from a recipe that I had written for Pad See Ew for our sauce base today. So if you're paying attention, it's going to start looking very similar to that stuff. As with many recipes, we're starting off by crushing and mincing. This is 4 cloves of garlic, followed by fine mincing. This is going to be about an inch's worth of ginger, maybe a little bit less today actually. Running low on ginger. Shima, how's it going? Yeah, hello. Hello to everyone on YouTube. Hello to everyone on Reddit. How's everyone doing today? If you're looking for the recipes for the live streams, they always live over on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't found your way over to the YouTube channel yet, that's a good place to start, because it's where all of the recipes for the things that I cook on stream live. Almost everything that we cook on stream, not everything, but almost everything will live in a recipe form over on YouTube. So the version of Pad Kee Mao that we're doing today already exists over on YouTube as a recipe that we did. I want to say that was back in earlier this year. I think it was back in like February or so. So if you're looking for that stuff, that's a good place to start. In addition to the recipe videos, that's also where our concurrent live stream lives. So if you're watching behind me, there's another laptop that's going on. That laptop goes over to YouTube, and on that YouTube channel, there's a whole schedule of all of the live streams, things that we stream on live stream. So if you wanted to find out what we're going to be cooking next, that's a good place to start, because it has everything planned out. I think it goes about like almost 3 weeks. I think a little over 3 weeks actually. So if you're looking for that stuff, that's a good place to go. We're working our way to 4,000 subs by 4,500 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and subscribe. By the way, if you've never chopped a bell pepper upside down like I just did, that's one of my favorite new tricks because it was so much easier than how you normally would cut a bell pepper. So if you've never done it before, I highly recommend it. What you do want to make sure when we're working with the bell peppers though, is that, especially when you're working the red bell pepper, is that all of this white stuff, you got to tear that out. It's got this white membrane in it. That stuff gets really, really bitter in wok fries. No matter how well you cook your bell pepper, that white membrane is going to get pretty bitter. So especially when you're working with, actually it might be a little bit better with the red bell pepper. But when we're talking about bell peppers that are under-ripened, so especially green bell peppers, for example, that stuff is going to be real bitter, so we want to make sure to pull that stuff out. Also, green bell peppers are disgusting. Shima, oh, you did a stir fry yesterday. Oh, cool, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Definitely, like if you're just getting your feet wet with stir frying, stir frying is really a very adaptable type of cuisine. So it's not necessarily that you need to be following a recipe. Just generally following like a set of guidelines. That's what I've found is that as long as you're approaching it in the same way, and really just like following a handful of like basic principles to stir frying, you're gonna be okay. So for our red bell pepper, I started slicing these up incorrectly. I started doing a large dice, and then I stopped. What we're going for here are these nice long and thin strips of red bell pepper. That's going to work really nicely with our chow fun. It's also like one of the iconic, general like ways that red bell pepper will be seen in a lot of Pad Kee Mao. If you're not familiar, a Pad Kee Mao, it can contain a whole bunch of different types of veggies. So for today, we're going to be working with some sweet white onion. There's also going to be some red bell pepper and some broccoli. So we're going to just be using some plain old American broccoli. I've seen it with a lot of different things. You can have any number of different kinds of bell pepper. You could probably throw some bean sprouts in there if you want. You could have all sorts of different types of veggies. For today's version, I'm going with these three because they tend to be just like some of the more like classic ingredients that go into Pad Kee Mao, excuse me. The main big differences that we want to address today, though, are the big differences that are distinguish the differences between a Pad See Ew and a Pad Kee Mao. So, if you're not familiar, a Pad See Ew looks very, very similar to a Pad Kee Mao. The main differences being that a Pad See Ew contains a whole bunch of extra veggies that you generally won't come across in things like a Pad See Ew. So a Pad See Ew probably more typically would be seen with probably just some kind of broccoli, so usually gailan. This is a Chinese broccoli. And that might be the only vegetable that you come across in a Pad See Ew. If it contains another type of veggie, it's probably not a Pad See Ew, it's probably actually a Pad Kee Mao, which is what we're doing today. And they both look very, very similar because they otherwise have very similar sauce bases. They're both relying very heavily on the use of dark soy sauce. They're both using chow fun rice noodles, which are very wide and very delicate. Otherwise, they all generally kind of look the same, other than the addition of extra veggies. So this is my bell pepper. We're going for thin strips and setting aside like so. One thing that we want to pay attention to, since we are throwing so many vegetables into our Pad Kee Mao today, so we want to start paying attention to how much of each of them that we're chopping. So right now I'm getting to my broccoli here next, and we're only going to be using a single head of broccoli. I think in the Pad See Ew recipe that we did, that used, I want to say like 2 or 3 heads of broccoli, because it's the only vegetable in a Pad Kee Mao, in a Pad See Ew. For today's version, however, since we're using so many different types of vegetables, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative with how much of each vegetable that we're chopping. So broccoli, for our broccoli especially, because it contains a large surface area. Yeah. Hermina, yeah, how's it going? Not bad, yeah. Thanks for asking. How is everyone? So for our broccoli, what we're doing here is we're chopping these into large and long spears. So what our goal is right now is to get our broccoli into the general shape and size that we would come across if we were eating gailan, which is a Chinese broccoli. It looks very, very similar. Well, it doesn't look super similar, but the main notable things that we want to pay attention to is that gailan is long and thin, and that's kind of what makes it flash cook in a wok fry so easily, is because it is long and thin. That general shape of it will allow it to cook a little bit easier. So the same problem that you're going to run into if you're subbing gailan with regular broccoli, like we are right now, is that broccoli is a lot more wide and durable. So if we were to just throw a whole floret of broccoli in, like if it was like this, for example, so it's like very, very wide, that probably wouldn't cook all the way through. So we would probably have like a relatively like chewy piece of broccoli, probably mostly still raw, Generally things that we don't want when we're eating broccoli. And the way that you normally would work around that if you were coming across broccoli in most like European cuisines, or actually probably most American cuisine really, is that you generally come across broccoli par cooked. So it would probably be steamed, sometimes it might be boiled, blanched, some kind of, sometimes you might see it baked oftentimes. All of those are excellent ways of what we're essentially trying to do is break down the really, really durable qualities of broccoli, where we're trying to get it to sort of like lose its crunch, and we're looking for like steamed and like kind of toothsome broccoli. So what we're after today with our broccoli today is actually not going to be that quality, because we're not going to par cook it. We're just going to throw it right into the wok, and then we're going to look for that generally like slightly crisp quality to our veggies, which is what we're going for today. So in order to make that work though, we have to chop it in a very specific way. So it's got to be in these like nice long thin spears, and that's going to help our wok cook really get these things to like sort of be crispy and like crunchy, but also like thoroughly cooked. So we're going to cook these at very, very high heat for a very, very short duration of time. And without that par cook, they would absolutely undercook. So I'm giving these a quick rinse or wash really. And then the most important thing anytime that we wash vegetables in general, actually, before they get into our wok fry, is that we want to shake off all of this water. So there's a whole bunch of water that's going to stick around in your veggies like this. All of that stuff, we don't want it to get into our wok fry. So if it ends up in our wok fry, that's going to be a real bad situation, because what's going to happen is that water gets into the wok, and then it's going to start dropping the temperature of the wok. And then that's how you end up with real mushy stir fries. So in order to avoid that, we want these things to be about as dry as you possibly can. I'm not being super thorough. But if you really want to be thorough, you could take out a salad spinner. That might help even more. I'm not going to do that because I'm lazy, but that might be a good option. All right, so next up, this is our onion. So this is going to be half of a sweet white onion. So I'm going to chop this in half. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go for a large dice on this today. Oops. So for our large dice, so there's a couple of things that we want to pay attention to anytime that we're large dicing an onion. The main thing is that which direction is the onion facing. So this right here, this would be the root of the onion. So very often if you have an over-ripened onion, you might see this have large roots sprouting out. And this on the other side, you might see it actually start sprouting. So it might just start growing another onion on this side. So what we want to do when we're going for our dice is cut that top part off and then peel. Like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to leave this root end on. This is very important when you're dicing. An onion, as you probably know, is made up of many, many different layers. So if you take off this root, those layers will just start coming apart, which is nice if you're making onion rings. But if we're going for a dice, though, we need this thing to hold together so that we can chop it. So with that root still on, you have nice big dices. And that root end, it just sort of holds the onion together while you dice, so that's really useful. If you've ever tried to dice an onion and it just sort of like falls apart while you're dicing, that's why. You've got to leave that root end on. All right. Last up, so the last vegetable that we're chopping today is going to be some Thai chilies. So I actually found these in Chinatown, which I discovered most recently I can find in Chinatown. In my opinion, this is probably one of the most quintessential ingredients that go into not just Pad Kee Mao, but like most Thai food. If you've ever had like Thai food and it's kind of spicy, this is where that spice is coming from, is the Thai chilies. So I like to say is you can dial up or down the amount of Thai chilies that you throw into a dish. Today I'm using 6. That's usually my sweet spot. I like to aim for 6 because that's how hot I like my Thai chilies. I'm also going to leave in all of these seeds, so you'll notice as I'm chopping, all of these seeds are going to stick around. That's very, very useful because that's where all of the capsaicin in our chilies live today. So I'm chopping off the roots here, and then we're going to go for just the thin slice. And as we chop, you're going to notice that all of those chilies, or all of those seeds are going to start popping out. That's really useful. That's where all of the capsaicin and spiciness of our Thai chilies live. So if you don't particularly like heat, I always say you can try deseeding a Thai chili. What I always say is that I don't really see the point in deseeding a Thai chili. If you don't like heat, you probably should just leave the chili out. Otherwise, you're not really going to get much out of it. It's not really like a jalapeno where you can deseed the jalapeno and still derive flavor. I usually say if you don't like heat, you could dial it down. You could add just one of them. You could add two of them. But this is where all of that like really, really aggressive heat is going to come from, is from our fresh Thai chili. So. All right, let's do these eggs. Next up is just going to be a couple of eggs. These are going to be the last thing that we throw into our wok fry. So what I always like to say is that a dish like a Pad See Ew or a Pad Kee Mao or even like a Pad Thai, most Thai noodles in general, it comes together, it's almost the exact opposite of how fried rice looks. So when you're making fried rice, you always throw in the eggs very, very early. And what we're trying to do when we're making fried rice is we throw in those eggs while the wok is still empty. So the goal is to hit the eggs on the bottom, like the hot surface of the wok, and that helps us develop nice egg curds. It sort of looks like scrambled eggs. That's what we're going for with fried rice. When we're working with Thai noodles, like a Pad See Ew or Pad Kee Mao like we are today, the goal is not actually to get egg curds. What we're trying to do is develop like egg-coated rice noodles. So we're actually going to throw those in very, very late. They're going to be the last thing that goes into the wok. Almost exactly opposite to how you would treat a fried rice. And that's going to give us like that nice like egg-coated rice noodle. Paul, how's it going? Your piece went AWOL, yeah. Cool. Hello, how is everyone? Hello to everyone on YouTube. Cool. So, this next up is our ground meat. This, I believe, is ground beef. Pretty sure that's ground beef. Looks a little bit fatty for ground beef. I think it's a very fatty ground beef. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's ground beef. It should be ground beef. And what we're going to do is a really quick marinade here. So I'm going to throw in just a handful of things. The one thing that we're leaving out today is some star anise, which I'm kind of bummed because I couldn't find any. Or I misplaced my star anise pods. But I'm going to go with my standby marinade today. This is going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by a single tablespoon of Shaoxing wine, which is a Chinese cooking wine. That's going to give us a little bit of brightness and a little bit of sweetness. Then next up is going to be half a teaspoon of white pepper. Followed finally by the last thing that we're going to add. Will be half a teaspoon of cornstarch. So of all of the things that we're adding to our marinade, I think the cornstarch is probably the most important aspect. And that's not because it tastes like something that doesn't really do anything in terms of flavor. But what it really does is it's going to coat the exterior of our noodles, or of our beef today. And that's going to just slow down that exterior cook time by just a little bit, probably by maybe like 30-40 seconds. And what that does is just gives the interior, so the interior portion of the ground meat, just a little bit more time to cook through. So that's really, really useful. You'll see me throw that into most meat marinades. And it's a really, really important thing that we integrate when we're cooking meat in woks, because woks, they heat up really, really hot, and they cook things really, really fast because they're so hot. So in order to address the fact that things are cooking very, very fast on that wok, we have to slow down the exterior cook time. So I do the same similar thing when we do things like scrambled eggs in a wok, or chicken thigh, chicken breast, all of those things, meats, beef, flank steak, all of those things, they have a little bit of cornstarch on it. And that just slows down that exterior cook time just long enough so that the interior cook can catch up a little bit. Yeah. Have I tried making a drunk fried rice? No, but that sounds pretty interesting. I might actually try that. Yeah, I have to think about it. A drunk fried rice. Yeah, I have to think about what that is. Fried rice is such a mutable thing. You could really put whatever you want into a fried rice. I've discovered. All right, next up, before we get to our noodles, we're gonna do our sauce. So this is probably one of the most reused sauce recipes that I have come up with so far. And the reason for that is it's because it looks very similar to almost every recipe that I have done with chow fun. So it is the sauce recipe that I use for this dish, for Pad Kee Mao. It's the same recipe, so you'll notice over in my recipe book that we used for our Pad See Ew. So this is the one that I had originally written for Pad See Ew. I also used something very, very similar when we did beef chow fun, which in my opinion is basically the Chinese equivalent of Pad Kee Mao. Because it's chow fun rice noodles with beef in it. Looks very, very similar to a Pad See Ew, except instead of chicken it has beef, and instead of broccoli or gailan it has bok choy. So that's 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, followed by 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. Hey, that's Ham Charo. Thank you for subscribing. That's Ham Charo. If you haven't met Ham Charo, he's the hamster that eats ramen. Ham Charo only gets to eat ramen when you feed him. He only gets fed when you subscribe, so please subscribe to YouTube or Ham Charo will starve to death. That's 2 tablespoons of dark soy sauce. Next up, this is going to be 2 tablespoons of black vinegar. Followed by 4 tablespoons of fish sauce, or a 1/4 cup in other words. Finally, 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. And then the last thing that we're going to add is just a little bit of sambal olek, which is going to give us a little bit of extra heat. That's going to add nicely to our Thai chilies. You'll notice that there's one very important element that you can notice about our sauce today, is that they're all very, very dark ingredients. So we use dark soy sauce, we use dark black vinegar, we also used regular soy sauce, we also used some oyster sauce. So all of those things, they're contributing to that iconic color that we're looking for in our Pad See Ews, in our Pad Kee Maos, and our dark beef chow funs that gives us that nice dark caramel brown color. And it's really like what stains those noodles, that really dark color. So this is the reason why I reuse this sauce element so often, is because all of those things, when I think about like how chow fun works, they all look very, very similar. So that's our sauce. One thing that we want to pay attention to, though, is that because all of the things that we just added are very concentrated, so dark soy sauce and dark vinegar, black vinegar, and oyster sauce, all 3 of those things are extremely concentrated, which makes them very syrupy. So we don't want to just throw this straight into our wok when we get to it. We want to add it very sparsely and then adjust. So add it a little bit at a time and then take a look, toss it to combine. And if things are looking too dark, don't use all of it. It's very useful. Pay attention. Don't just dump it in, because depending on like how much rice noodles that you have, how much fat renders out of your beef, how much like your vegetables are broken down, all of these things can change the way whether or not you're going to need all of that sauce. So especially when we're working with things that contain dark soy sauce, pay attention. Don't just drop it in. Okay, so last up, this is our fresh chow fun rice noodles. So if you've ever seen me working with chow fun rice noodles, you'll know that I have messed up working with fresh chow fun rice noodles many, many times. It's because it is a very, very frustrating ingredient to work with. And that's because it is extremely perishable. So on many occasions, I have purchased fresh chow fun and then it went bad, which is super frustrating. And that was because I constantly found myself buying it a couple of days before I ended up using it. So I used to buy fresh chow fun and then use it maybe a day or maybe 2 days later. You don't ever want to do that, because fresh chow fun probably only has a shelf life of like maybe 48 hours, and like by 48 hours you're kind of pushing it. I want to say you want to use it within like 24 hours of purchasing it. And that's because they go really, really stale really, really fast. And then once they're stale, what they start doing is they stop holding their shape. So they just sort of like break apart, and then you have like fractured bits and pieces of chow fun. So what I like to do in order to make sure that we avoid one of the many pitfalls of fresh chow fun is pull apart the noodles, which is what we're doing right now. So when you find them packaged like this, they'll probably be rolled up into tightly coiled shapes. And what you don't want to do is drop it right into the wok like this, because depending on how fresh it is, it might not actually come apart in the wok. So what you'll end up with if you just throw this straight into the wok and it's not particularly fresh is that it might just come up as a clump of fresh chow fun, which is not super fun, because you're going to end up with just a brick of Pad Kee Mao, which is not fun. And it pretty much will just ruin the dish, which I have done many times on more than one occasion. So in order to make sure that they don't clump up in our wok fry, I'm pulling these noodles apart and setting them aside. So it's a little bit tedious. It kind of takes an extra, maybe an extra minute or so, but that's very, very useful. You'll also notice, so that you'll take a look at my hands, and all of this oil is coming off. That's because fresh chow fun is packed in oil. It's meant to keep the noodles from sticking together, but it also contributes to how oily the dish gets because it's got so much oil in it. So I find that pulling the noodles apart, it kind of helps reduce some of that oiliness a little bit too. So do yourself a favor. Don't just throw this chow fun straight into the wok, because you could ruin dinner, so don't do that. I also recommend, so if you're looking for fresh chow fun, it is tricky to get your hands on fresh chow fun because it's so perishable. If you find it, you generally will find it in Chinese markets. I generally find it somewhere close to the front, because it's usually something that those markets are probably stocking every day. It's something that comes off the truck literally every day because it's so perishable. So I usually find it close to the register, somewhere up front, somewhere like nearby where they don't have to transport it super far. So it also sells out really quickly because they only stock it in super small quantities. So usually they'll probably only have maybe 10 packs. And a lot of the times, a lot of the restaurants are going to buy out that stock. So if you're looking for fresh chow fun, you're going to want to try and get to the market a little bit early, or else you might not be able to get your hands on it. If you're looking for a more pantry-friendly substitute, you can also just use regular old dry rice noodles. I think they're sometimes called rice sticks, something like that. That's always a real fine alternative. You can totally just use that stuff. It's basically rice noodles that are freeze-dried, and then they're pantry stable, so you can store them in your pantry. Those things can stay in the pantry forever. You could keep them in the pantry for, I've had rice noodles, some packages of rice noodles in my pantry for 6 months, even longer maybe, and that's going to be fine because they're freeze-dried, so they're going to stay fresh, or they're going to stay edible for a long time, and then you just hydrate them in water. That's going to be really useful. But if you can get your hands on fresh chow fun like this, it's going to be worth it. So that's our chow fun. You can take a look at my hands. So they're full of oil. So all of that oil, it would have ended up in our wok. It's really useful to try and get as much of that oil off as possible. And we're ready to head to the stove. All right, so over on the stove, I've got my wok. It's going to start heating up. I probably should have turned the fire on a little bit earlier. But we're going to start heating up that wok, and we're going to get it going. It's going to get nice and hot. We want that wok to be ripping hot before we start cooking. So we're going to give it maybe a minute. Good carbon steel wok like that usually only takes about a minute to heat up. And then we're going to start cooking. Lots of people ask me how hot the fire is, or what temperature do I keep the fire at while I'm cooking. In a wok cook like this, especially if you're cooking on a home range, this is actually not necessarily true if you're on a wok burner. But if you're cooking on a home range, you're probably only going to be at one heat. It's basically just going to be at hot. So the wok, my gas range right now is just at hot. It's at highest. It's the highest that the fire will go. And anytime that you're cooking on a wok in a home range, you're probably just going to be sitting at that high heat, because the wok itself is going to start losing heat on its own, so you're not really going to do anything if you start turning the fire down. Really, if you find yourself turning the fire down on a wok burner, it probably means that you're doing something wrong. So, yeah. Cool. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. with new recipes up on my YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday we came out with a recipe for Chinese jin dui, which is a dim sum dessert that you come across a lot. We actually cooked it on stream yesterday. Friday before that we did something, I think we did katsu donburi. I think that's what was Friday before that. But those are out every Friday, so if you're looking for those recipes, they're coming up every Friday over on the YouTube channel. So new stuff out every Friday. We're working our way to 4,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and feed him Charles. He's the hungry hamster that pops up every time someone subscribes. Cool. So over on my stove, my wok, it's starting to heat up. You can see it starting to smoke. That's generally a sign that the wok is getting nice and hot. If you don't see that smoke, actually sometimes the wok will get really hot. Usually we'll hit that smoke point and start smoking, and eventually we'll pass that smoke point and then it's going to stop smoking because it's basically burned off everything that's still in the wok. So I'm looking for that smoke to start appearing, and once we start seeing all of that smoke, it's generally a sign that we're ready to start cooking. We're going to do a couple of things that come from batch cooking. Batch cooking is very important when we're cooking on a home range because it's going to help us keep the wok hot. So lots of folks are afraid to cook in a wok because they're worried that you're going to lose heat and then end up with a mushy stir fry. So the way that we work around that is by cooking in batches. Starting off with my garlic and ginger. And then we're going to bloom those until they're aromatic. I usually give it about 10-15 seconds, but that kind of depends on how hot your wok is. So I always say is use your nose at this point. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, it's when you know you're ready to move on. Then next up is our ground beef. We're using ground beef today. And then what we're going to do here is our goal right now is just to break up those large pieces. So, especially if you're using frozen ground mince like this is today. This is like relatively defrosted ground mince. But we really want to just make sure that this doesn't like basically turn into a hamburger patty. And at this point, you're going to start noticing that that cornstarch that we added to the marinade, it's going to start coming into play here really nicely. So without that cornstarch, this would already be cooked all the way through. So you'll see it's just starting to brown a little bit. That's because the cornstarch is slowing down the exterior cook of our ground meat. So that's really useful because it's going to help keep our ground beef a little bit more tender than it would be if we didn't have that cornstarch involved. Isn't it Yan Can Cook? Yeah, that's Martin Yan. So Yan Can Cook, that's the namesake of this channel. So if you're looking for Martin Yan, he was a, actually I still think Martin Yan is still doing stuff. I follow him on Instagram. But his tagline was, Yan Can Cook, so can you. And yeah, this channel is an homage to him. All right. So we're going to give that, they'll probably take another like 30-45 seconds and it should be cooked all the way through. You'll notice that those things, our ground beef is going to cook really quickly today. That's because our wok fire is so hot. So that high heat, we're cooking on very, very high heat for a very short amount of time. Yeah. The other reason why I love using ground beef for a purpose like this today is because it has lots of fat in it. So you'll notice that at the bottom of my wok, all of this fat is starting to pull up here. That's going to help us create a really nice and rich sauce base with all of that fat introduced. And then what we're going to do is, so I'm pulling my meat out of the wok. That's very, very important. Is we want to pull this out of the wok and then cook our next element. So this is essentially what batch cooking is. It's very, very important when we're talking about batch cooking because what we're trying to do is make sure that there's not too many things in the wok at any given point in time. So today we're batch cooking our meat and then removing, and then we're going to batch cook our veggies next. So that's basically going to make sure that when we get to our second set of things, so today that's going to be our veggies, broccoli, bell pepper, and onion. And that's making sure that when we get to those veggies, the wok has plenty of heat, has enough heat to sort of flash cook those veggies on high heat. So if you've ever cooked in a wok and like tried to keep it hot on a home range, which doesn't have like really high heat like a wok burner does, you'll notice that as the wok starts filling up, the temperature of the wok starts dropping. So if we left that meat in, it probably might have been able to get away with it. But what we're trying to do is make sure that that wok is really hot. So the hotter that the wok is, the more crispy and like crunchy your vegetables will stay. So if it's really low on heat, for example, you're going to end up with like a kind of a mushy stir fry. You're going to have like mushy broccoli, mushy bell peppers. It's generally qualities that we don't want to happen in a stir fry. So I'm removing my beef, and then we're going to add, this is going to be another maybe 2 tablespoons of peanut oil. And this is our Thai chilies going in. And I say this pretty much every time that we use Thai chilies, but when you use them, when those get into the wok, make sure that your windows are open because you're going to start kicking up capsaicin, and it's going to... that's the smoke from the Thai chilies is pretty caustic, so you want to try and avoid inhaling that stuff. Almost every time it starts making me cough. We'll see this time. Next up is our broccoli. It got me. Damn it. So I like to give the broccoli a little bit of a head start here, usually about like maybe a minute. And the reason for that is broccoli is a very durable veggie, so it's going to take a little bit longer than the rest of our vegetables to cook. I usually will like organize the vegetables entrance into the wok by the amount of time that it takes to cook them. So broccoli being the most durable veggie. I'm going to follow that up in about 30-45 seconds with our bell peppers, because bell peppers are also very durable. And then finally, the last vegetable that we'll get into our wok is our onions, which are very delicate, so we don't want those to be in the wok for too long at all, really, or else we're going to have mushy onions, which is not fun. Yeah. Cool, that's looking good. Here's our bell peppers going in. And just like with our broccoli, I'm going to let those bell peppers go for a little bit longer than our onions. That's because the onions are really delicate, but those bell peppers are pretty durable. So we're just trying to cook off some of that rawness. So that's generally one of our goals when we're dealing with things like bell pepper or broccoli, is that we're just cooking off a little bit of rawness. So if you're like associating vegetables with other things that are cooked in frying pans, so like maybe a vegetable from like, say, something that you eat with a steak, or maybe like a steamed broccoli, for example, which is basically like pork tender, you might call it. That's not our goal with a wok stir fry like this. Really, what we're trying to do is keep these veggies pretty crispy. What I always say is like just past the raw stage, so like about like a minute or two past that raw stage. So it's going to be very crunchy, but also cooked through and not necessarily a raw vegetable. All right, so that's our onion getting into the wok finally. And like I mentioned earlier, those onions, they're a little bit more delicate than the rest of our veggies. So what we want to try and do is make sure that those onions don't get in the wok for too long here. So I'm going to let it go for maybe another minute before we add everything back and finish things up. It's going to make you hungry. Yeah, that's generally the goal. I hope it makes you hungry. So I'm just giving my wok a toss. The main reason that we want to keep agitating the wok is because we're trying to regulate the heat of the wok. So the more that you move around the wok, the more heat that it starts shedding. So if you find that your wok is under heat and you find that it's not quite hot enough, it's not burning quite hot enough, but your fire is already maxed out, one of the solutions to that is to just stop moving it, and it's going to start heating up again. The downside to that is that if you stop moving it for too long, it will eventually start burning, which is not great. So we're balancing the equation here, essentially. All right. Well, it's looking good. This is my ground beef going back to the wok. And finally is our fresh chow fun. I'm not, just like when we were pulling them apart earlier though, I'm going to add these a handful at a time, followed by a little bit of our sauce. Turn this overhead too. And then we're going to stop doing that really aggressive wok tossing that we were doing earlier. That's very, very important when we're dealing with chow fun, because fresh chow fun is extremely delicate. So we don't want to just go and throw all of the chow fun in and then keep tossing the way that we were doing before, because it's essentially going to start causing that chow fun to sort of break apart. And we're going to have like crumbled bits and pieces of chow fun, which is not our objective here. So I'm going to add the chow fun, I want to say like a handful at a time or so. And then just sort of toss it to combine very, very gently. And our goal at this point is to just make sure that we hold those long strands of noodle together as best as we can. They will probably eventually, some of them are going to start breaking because they're really delicate. But we're doing our very best to hold as much of those long strands together as possible. And I'm just tossing to combine. I'm really just turning at this point. We're not really even tossing at this point. Really just turning. So you notice that our wok tossing is very different now that that chow fun is in. It's a lot more delicate. And then next I'm adding my sauce base here, but just a little bit at a time. You'll notice that that's only going in maybe like 2 tablespoons at a time or so. And then I'm tossing. And then I'm paying attention to like the general like texture and color of our stir fry right now. So when it starts getting dark enough, I'm paying attention to like that color, the general shade. And if you're not certain, I've made this many times, so I have not really needed to taste things in a while. But if you're really not sure, get a fork out and start tasting. This is looking pretty good already, so I might not actually use all of this sauce today. Yeah. It's 3:09, it's not dinner time. Yeah. It's close enough. Alright, so the last thing that we're adding here is our egg, which is going to go right on top. There's actually 2 eggs, so plural eggs. And that's going to go right on top of our stir fry. And kind of like exactly the opposite of what we were doing when we were cooking fried rice a couple of days ago. So we're adding that on top of our egg, and then we're going to let it set, and that's going to give us those nice like lacy layers of egg that kind of coat the chow fun. Yeah, you already follow us on YouTube. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you for following on YouTube. Hello to everyone just tuning in. If you're just tuning in just now, this is Woo Can Cook. If you haven't caught one of these streams before, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. If you're looking for it, the live stream also exists over on YouTube. That's the one behind me. That has a whole schedule of everything that we're going to be cooking within the next, I want to say, like 2-3 weeks now. So if you want to find out what we're going to be cooking next, it's a good place to go. That's also where all of the recipes live too. So if you're trying to find out how to cook that things that we're cooking, that's a good place to go. Those are out every Friday. So every Friday we've got a new recipe out. This was a Pad Kee Mao recipe that we did. I want to say that was back in this was back in March or so, March or April, I forget. Now those are out every Friday, so last Friday we did a jiandui, which is like a Chinese dessert, dim sum dessert. And Friday before that, I believe, was katsudamburi. And then I can't remember everything after that. So if you're looking for those recipes, that's a good place to start. We're also working our way to 4,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. All right. So that's our egg. I'm going to start tasting at this point and adjust. Ooh, yeah. That's good. I'm gonna give it a little bit more sauce, and that ought to do it. Yeah. Let's use that bowl. So the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in a wok, especially if you're cooking in a carbon steel wok like this one, is we want to clean that wok while it's hot, because the wok, carbon steel especially, has a nice non-stick surface that's really useful when we're dealing with woks, because while it's hot, it has a non-stick surface that's going to help us clean the wok really easily. So usually, especially when we're dealing with things that contain eggs, like a Pad Kee Mao, like we're doing today, it's really useful because it means that you're not going to have to scrub it nearly as hard. So if you were to, for example, what I have done many times, is clean the wok, or sat down and then eaten, and then come back and then try and clean the wok. So one of the big tendencies that we all have is that we want to just leave the food in the wok, because why not? There's food in front of you. It's time to eat. But very, very useful is to do yourself a favor, clean that wok while it's hot, and it's going to be a lot easier to get that stuff off. So I did a little bit of scrubbing just now to get that egg off, and that's pretty much it. And then the last thing that I'll do, I don't do this after every time, but I like to give it a little bit of a coating of oil, especially if it's looking a little bit dry like it is today. And that's just going to help us prevent any kind of oxidation or rusting on the wok. And that's about it. So, carbon steel, take care of it, and it will last forever. Yeah. Cool. Estef, yeah, hello, yummy. Good to see you. You're cooking it tomorrow, yeah. Let me know how it goes. There is a subreddit that has lots of pictures, so people have been posting in the subreddit. That's really cool. So yeah, if you give it a shot, cook it tomorrow, let me know. Send me some pictures. Yeah. Let's plate this up. So hopefully, if you've done this correctly, and you don't mess up that chow fun, now you should still have some pretty long, nice, lacy, like long sheets of noodle. If you messed it up, which I have many times, it looks like we did okay today, but I have definitely messed this up many times. That chow fun will start breaking apart because it's that delicate. Chow fun is that delicate, especially fresh chow fun. So, but if you tossed it very, very gently, you should still have these nice, long, lengthy layers of noodle. All right. Cool. There it is. Yeah, thank you. Cool. Let's give this a taste. Yeah, that's wonderful. So those bell peppers stay nice and crispy. Even the onions are still nice and crispy. That's really tricky to do. That's also, someone mentioned that just like a general stir-fry techniques is really tricky to nail down. But that's generally like one of the big properties of stir-frying. is figuring out how to make sure that your vegetables stay nice and crispy. Especially if you're dealing with a wide range of vegetables like we are today. That can get really tricky because it comes down to timing. So if we're dealing with things that go like broccoli, bell peppers, and onions, for example, those are three very, very different types of vegetables. And if you're not paying attention, if you throw them all in at once, for example, the onions will probably be either overcooked or the broccoli is going to be undercooked, which is not going to be great. So one of the big principles of stir frying is that you have to make sure that you time those vegetables correctly and make sure that the wok stays nice and hot. Otherwise, you're going to end up with something wrong with the vegetables. So our goal with a vegetable-based stir fry like this is going to be making sure that we keep those things nice and crispy for the duration of the cook time. Yeah, Mom, that's a great username. Mama, Mommy, Mama, Ma. 6:30 PST every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. So if you're looking for it, you can definitely make your way over to the YouTube. There it is. And that has a whole schedule of the stream, so that has all of the times. Pretty much everything that we're going to be cooking for, I want to say at least 3 weeks it goes out. And basically what we're doing is every Monday we're going to be cooking through the recipe that came out on Friday. So every Friday there's a new recipe. This was a recipe that came up on the channel. I believe it was inspired by Lady and the Tramp. That was the one that we were doing. And those come out every Friday, and then the following Monday, so the Monday that comes after whenever that recipe came out, we'll probably be cooking through it live. That's almost every time. That's almost for sure if it's something that I can eat for dinner, I'll probably be cooking through it live. Sometimes I skip some of the recipes I skip because they're like desserts or like they're baked things that you can't really do well on the stream. But almost everything, if it's cooked for dinner, probably gonna cook it on stream. You're a night owl. You're gonna watch at 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, that's great. It's perfect. Cool. Yeah. Hopefully, let me know if you give it a try too. I always love when people take a shot at the recipes. There's a subreddit too. It's our Woo Can Cook. And lots of people have been posting their attempts. I think that someone took a picture and posted a picture of, actually, I think it was this recipe. I want to say it was this recipe. It was either this one or Pad Kee Mao. I can't remember now. But that one was up over on Reddit. That's really cool to see how other people's attempts turn out. So definitely find that subreddit too if you're taking photos. Lots of fun stuff. What else? Oh yeah, so the recipes, those always live over on the YouTube channel, so if you're looking for that stuff, that's a good place to start. Those are out every Friday, and we're working our way to 4,500 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. We're nearly there. I think we're at like 4,000 and change. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. Yeah, thanks everyone. Cool. So wow, that's 2 hours and change. Cool. Yeah, I think we nailed it. This is probably one of the faster streams that we've done in a while. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Definitely let me know if you try this one out. I always love seeing what other people's attempts look like. Let me know if you have any questions too, especially this one, because there's a lot of things that you can sub out. So if you don't have ground mince like ground beef or ground pork, you can also just use chicken thigh or chicken breast. Either of those things will work really well. You don't have to have these exact vegetables. You can use gailan instead of broccoli. You could leave the broccoli out entirely and just use bell pepper and onion. If you don't have those things, you could use other things. You could use probably bean sprouts would go really well. You could probably use kale. That would probably look really great. Any kind of leafy green might look really good. Anything that you could think of that goes in a stir fry and will stir fry up nicely. That's a good substitute. So probably the one thing that you're going to need is that chow fun. If you can't find chow fun though, any kind of rice noodle is going to work out. Too much carbs. Not a huge amount of carbs. Well, no more carbs than like a bowl of pasta. I actually think that this is like in terms of like stir fries, one of the healthier ones because it has a lot of vegetables in it. So if we're just talking about like healthy stir fries, well, it's got a lot of salt in it too. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if it's too much carbs. It's definitely too much sodium though, for sure. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. All right, let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes. Definitely, if you haven't yet, hop over to the YouTube, give that a subscribe. We're nearly there. By the end of the month, we're aiming for 4,500 by the end of the month. So hopefully we could hit it. We have a couple of different Thai noodle dishes too. So I think Pad Kee was the one that came out before this. And pretty recently we did a stream for Pad Thai, which was super fun. And what are we doing? Oh yeah, ooh, shoot, should put it. So not every Thursday, but many Thursdays of the month. I'll do a stream that's essentially, I'll post everything that's in my refrigerator on poll over on the YouTube channel. I forgot to post the poll, so I'm gonna have to post that tonight. And that poll will contain not everything, but like the top 20 things that I can think of in my refrigerator. And I'll ask people to vote on those things, and then I'll assemble a recipe that's based off of the things that you vote for. So this week it should be pretty interesting. We're gonna do that this Thursday, so in 2 days. This week it should be pretty interesting because I have a whole bunch of shit in my refrigerator right now. So some of it is gonna be like relatively common things that you throw in a wok fry, like garlic and ginger, stuff like that. But some of it is really weird because a lot of those things that are in my refrigerator are not meant to go into a stir fry. So I think most recently we did a ramen that had a little bit of orange juice in it, which actually worked out pretty good. So yeah, if you want to tune in for that, that's a fun place. Those are always fun streams. And those polls, they always pop up over on the YouTube channel. So if you want to be a part of that, vote on some stuff, hop over to the YouTube. The poll should come up. Hopefully I'll post it this tonight. Otherwise, tomorrow. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye. Oh, please feed Ham Charl. That's Ham Charl eating ramen. He only gets to eat when you subscribe, so please go and subscribe over on YouTube. All right. Bye. Go. If you think that you don't know, never mind, that you still don't love yourself, no. You can find it from somebody else, no. Everybody's got to grow up sometime. Funny how we shoot the move, still will we fighting, baby. Alright, never mind. Everybody wants to be nothing. I still got dreams, but they don't love me like they used to love it. And I'm reminded of how bad I used to want it. And yes, I still got dreams, but more like a toolkit of my 20s, and it's breaking me down. Want to be, baby, yes
You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're bed warm, glass of brandy, darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
Coming out of